Welcome to Japan Media Review Podcast. Today we're going to talk about why Japan's far right is absolutely furious at Takaichi for her immigration policies. As you all probably already know, Japan got a new prime minister, and she's famously very conservative, has a very right wing reputation, and Japan's far right has very high hopes for her to crack down on immigration, to stop immigration, and to deport all foreigners. And it turns out that she's not going to do any of that. And today we're going to review how that's happening. On November 4th, a very important meeting happened that many people were looking forward to. So, this is the first official meeting of the Takaichi administration on foreigner related policies. And of course, it's the meeting is led by Takaichi, but also has the very important participation with Onoda, the new minister of foreigner policies. So people who care about issues related to foreigners and immigration, well, basically the entire right wing, they were closely following the meeting and strongly looking forward to it. So the far right was looking forward to Takaichi and Onoda announcing how they're gonna crack down on immigration and expel foreigners from Japan and ban foreigners from coming to Japan. And guess what? None of that happened in the meeting. And what they got instead was actually a meeting that's pretty pro-immigration. The meeting is titled The Ministerial Meeting on the Acceptance of Foreigners and the Realization of an Orderly Society of Coexistence with Foreigners. And in this meeting, Takaichi emphasized that foreign labor and foreign tourists are essential to Japan, and peaceful coexistence with foreigners remains the government's core belief. And these are actually the LDP's core principles, and Takaichi has no intention of challenging them. And on the other hand, of course, the LDP has already promised a orderly society, so the administration will be trying to look into some law breaking by foreigners. And also the idea that maybe there might be some restriction on the foreign acquisition of Japanese real estate. And after the meeting, Minister Onoda gave a press conference on what she thinks are the key points of the meeting. So she says that the general directions of foreigner-related policies in this administration right now is to first make sure that foreigners are following existing rules and laws. So basically, she's saying that the administration is not in a rush to make a bunch of new rules and laws for foreigners. The administration's priority right now is actually to make sure that existing rules and laws are being followed by foreigners. So basically, you shouldn't expect any sort of drastic changes overnight because the administration is not in a rush to make drastic changes. The administration is focused on making sure that current rules and laws are effective. And Onoda said there might be some restrictions coming on Airbnb or Airbnb-like services where you rent out private homes to tourists. And she also mentions that there will be restriction on the foreign acquisition of Japanese real estate. There is no evidence to suggest that the LDP is considering some sort of large-scale overall wholesale blanket ban on foreigners' ability to purchase Japanese real estate. According to what current evidence suggests, the LDP is considering restricting foreigners' ability to purchase real estate in locations of national importance or restricting foreign investors' ability to buy Japanese properties purely for reasons of investment or purely for Airbnb purposes. So if you're a resident of Japan and you're just looking to buy a house to live in Japan, it's unlikely that you'd be affected. In the press conference, Onoda made this very important statement that clarifies the general direction of the Takaichi administration in regards to how to regulate or manage foreigners. She says, We have always emphasized that we're only targeting those foreigners who don't follow our rules and laws. And it's important for the media to report we aren't trying to expel all foreigners. We don't want law abiding foreigners to be worried. As someone with foreign roots, I don't want all foreigners to be blamed due to the bad behaviors of some foreigners. And this statement is pretty consistent with the overall messages of the Takaichi administration in regards to foreigners. So basically, she's saying that there's not going to be some sort of overall blanket ban on foreigners or immigration. We're only trying to, make sure that certain criminals or rule breakers are taken care of. There's not going to be some sort of overall effort to expel foreigners from Japan on a large scale. Both Onoda and Takaichi were very clear on November 4th in conveying the message that the government has not changed its stance on letting foreigners into the country as tourists or as workers coming to Japan to fill labor shortages or foreigners living in Japan. So even though Takaichi has this anti-immigration reputation, and also Onoda also has the same anti-foreigner reputation, these two strongly quote-unquote anti-foreigner figures basically both came out on November 4th saying that actually we're still pretty committed to coexistence with foreigners and accepting foreigners. And this is because using foreign labor to fill labor shortages and using immigrants to combat population decline and using inbound tourism to boost Japan's economy and soft power, all these are core strategies and core principles of the LDP. No matter what you think Takaichi and Onoda represent, they are members of the LDP. They follow the basic frameworks and the basic principles of the LDP, and they do not go against what the LDP stands for. And a very confusing aspect of the LDP that confuses both foreigners and Japanese people is that the LDP allows its politicians to have a wide range of rhetorical strategies. So if you're a LDP politician, you're allowed to say very conservative things, very, racist, anti-foreigner things. You're allowed to say very liberal things, very, let's say, pro-LGBTQ, pro-feminism things. You're allowed to be very conservative or very liberal in your rhetorical strategies, in your words. But you're not allowed to actually go against the core principles and core policies of the LDP. No matter how much you say that you're anti-foreigner, no matter how conservative your words are, you're not allowed to actually implement a policy that stops immigration, because immigration is a core part of the LDP general framework. So, and if this is confusing to you, don't worry, that's actually also confusing to Japanese people, because look at how many, Japanese people are deceived into thinking that Takaichi will actually stop immigration. In my analysis of Japanese politics, I always try to make sure that I point out, hey, this is just a rhetorical strategy and that's a actual policy that's going to have concrete effect. I try to distinguish that's just words, they don't mean anything, versus that's actually going to happen as a concrete policy or a concrete law. So if you like what I'm doing, if you feel like that's helpful, please watch my previous podcast, but also read my posts in the YouTube community, and also join me on Patreon. I do a lot more on Patreon, and most of my Patreon content is for free. And these messages conveyed by Onoda and Takaichi on November 4th are not well received in the far-right community at all. The far-right is pissed. And here we have a comment about these November 4th messages by Shimada Yoichi, who's a elected member of the lower house, and he belongs to the Conservative Party. So he basically criticizes the meetings core message of a orderly society of coexistence. He's like, no, that shouldn't happen, in Japan, that's not something we should do, and we shouldn't turn Japan into a place that invites foreigners. So basically that's like a very strong criticism of this November 4th meeting by a far-right politician of the lower house. Other than the Conservative Party, the other far-right party, the Sanseito, is also pretty unhappy about these November 4th messages. On November 6th, there was a Q&A session in the National Diet, and the Sanseito leader, Kamiya, was allowed to question the prime minister. And he asked the following question to Takaichi. People of this nation want a reduction on the number of foreigners. Although the government has continuously denied that it encourages immigration, the reality is that there is no limit on immigration. Do you plan to expand or limit immigration? So he's basically saying, hey, we were expecting some sort of reduction on the number of foreigners or some sort of limit on the number of foreigners, and you didn't say anything about that so far. What's up with that? And Kamiya here is actually being very smart. He's actually targeting a weakness of Takaichi, because Takaichi has this image of being, I'm like super conservative and I'm like very anti foreigner, okay? So she has that image of being anti-foreigner, but she cannot commit herself to putting any sort of limit on the number of foreigners or immigrants allowed. She cannot say something like, from now on, we're only gonna allow, 1 million foreigners in Japan, or we're actually gonna, put a cap on the number of foreign tourists allowed, or put a cap on the number of visas we issue to foreigners. She's not allowed to say any of these because the LDP does not allow that. The LDP has no plan to put a numerical limit on the number of foreigners. So Kamiya here is asking a question that Takaichi cannot answer or finds very, very difficult to answer. So here's how Takaichi answered the question. She says, it's a fact that some fields need foreign labor due to population decline. The employment for a skill development program and the specified skill workers program are meant to fill labor shortages in certain fields with foreign workers. We will consider setting a limit on the number of foreigners accepted through these programs. So her first point is the government has established these programs for foreigners to come over to work in Japan because there's a concrete need in the Japanese labor market. So, there's a concrete reason and a concrete good reason for the government to have these programs. And her second point is to refute and counter Kamiya's accusation that, hey, why aren't you setting any limit on the number of foreigners allowed? And she's like, actually, we are thinking about putting a limit on the number of foreigners accepted through these programs. And here's why this is a very cunning answer. She seems like she's open to the idea, and in the process of considering setting a limit on the number of foreigners allowed, right? But if you read the actual words, or if you listen to the actual words, she's only talking about the two programs. She's only talking about the employment for skill development program and the specified skilled workers program. She's like, oh, sure, we might consider putting a limit on the number, in these two programs. That doesn't actually mean anything in the overall scheme of things. Just like these two small programs mean nothing in the overall influx of foreigners into Japan, right? So she's like, yeah, sure, we might put a limit, but only for these two programs. So yeah, so Takaichi is a politician. She's great at making it seem like she's promising something, but if you read the fine prints, if you read the word for word of what she's actually saying, she's not promising what you think she's promising. And even if you put a limit on the number of foreign workers in these two programs, when you need more foreign workers, you can just open a new program, right? So like it's like obviously this is not Takaichi fully understands that even if she promises to limit the number of foreign workers accepted through these two programs, it doesn't mean that the LDP needs to limit the overall number of foreign workers. They can just open new programs. And plus, she's not even promising that. She's not even saying that, okay, yeah, we will for sure put a limit. She's like, we'll consider doing it. So this is basically a non-answer. She said nothing. She seems like she gave a very good answer. She seems like she's open to the idea of limiting the amount of foreigners, but she actually said nothing, but she made it seem like she said something. And she does that over and over again. Like she does that on a daily basis. And that's why the far right thought she was going to stop immigration. Like she did this particular rhetorical strategy so often that she established a reputation among the far right that she's super anti-immigration, she's gonna stop immigration, while having never promised to implement any policy to stop immigration or stop inbound tourism. And after the Q&A session, Kamiya gave a press conference, and a reporter asked him, so Takaichi didn't say anything about restricting immigration, right? And Kamiya was like, yeah. And we now recognize that there is a big difference between her vision and ours. If you like this type of political analysis where I analyze the words of Japanese politicians and what they mean, what they imply, please consider joining me on Patreon for free. Most of my content on Patreon is free. I do a lot more on Patreon. I analyze the hottest political and socio-economic issues in Japan, including this sort of in-depth analysis of Japanese politics. I also have a chat room where I share real-time analyses and news regarding Japanese politics with my supporters. So please follow me on Patreon if you like this type of content. So even though the far right has been thoroughly deceived by Takaichi so far, some of them are actually waking up now after this November 4th meeting. So this is a far right YouTuber with 500,000 subscribers, and here's her comment on Takaichi's November 4th meeting. And she's like, what Takaichi said during the meeting was just Kishida and Ishiba's globalism presented in a prettier way. So in the far-right community, Kishida and Ishiba are accused of being globalists who promoted immigration and ruining Japan, right? So, and now they're like, oh wait, Takaichi is the same as Kishida and Ishiba. She's just another globalist. And she's also super pissed that Takaichi used the word kento in regards to restricting immigration. For those of you who have watched my previous podcast about the meaning of kento in Japanese politics, you should know that when LDP politicians use the word kento, it means they're not actually going to do it, right? So kento means considering doing something. So if the LDP politicians say, oh, we're going to consider restricting immigration, we're gonna kento restricting immigration, it probably just means that they're not gonna do it. So that's a throwback to my analysis of kento and Kishida's master strategy of kento. To understand the meaning of kento and why that's a big deal in Japanese politics, please check out my previous video. And if you check out Twitter, the far right community on Twitter is pretty pissed at Takaichi. Like there's like waves of anti-Takaichi tweets coming from the far right community. So this is a Sanseito member tweeting on November 5th saying that it turns out that Takaichi will not stop immigration. This is sad for those who thought she would solve the immigration problem. And this is a tweet by a far-right quote-unquote news outlet. It's a fake news outlet, like it spreads false information for the far-right community. So this is a news that it tweeted. Sad news, the Takaichi administration's policies are premised on the acceptance of more than 1.57 million legal immigrants through the Employment for Skill Development Program. So you don't have to take this number 1.57 million seriously because this is a fake news outlet for crazy far right people. But yeah, but basically, these far right news outlets are now going against Takaichi. They're like, oh no, Takaichi is actually, trying to import many, many immigrants. And more tweets by these angry far righters. So the first one's like, instead of stopping immigration, Takaichi only targets illegal immigrants. How naive. So yeah, so basically this far righter, they realize that Takaichi only has policies to target illegal immigrants and immigrants who are committing crime in Japan, and she had plans to do nothing about restricting legal immigrants. And she's like, oh my god, that's like so disappointing. And the second tweet is like, this administration has no intention to stop immigration. They use words like orderly society to beautify things and force multiculturalism upon us. So now she's realized that Takaichi actually supports multiculturalism and immigration. And more tweets going against Takaichi. So this is a person who's like, though there are many who have high hopes for Takaichi, you need to wake up. The LDP supports immigration no matter who is the prime minister. And he's actually right. The LDP has a very strong framework of supporting both using foreign labor to fill labor shortages and also promoting inbound tourism as a key part of the economy. So he's absolutely right that no matter who is the prime minister, the LDP is not changing its core stances on, welcoming immigrants and foreign tourists. So yeah, so they just now realize that, oh, Takaichi is just like any other LDP politician. And the second tweet is very angry. It says, it turns out that this Takaichi administration is a traitor of the nation who plans to push for multiculturalism, which endangers our people. I'm really disappointed. And as someone who has closely followed Takaichi and all her important speeches since the election season back in September and October, I can tell you that Takaichi is incredibly consistent with her words and rhetorical strategies. She's never actually said that she's going to stop immigration. She's never actually committed herself to any policy that would drastically reduce the number of foreigners in Japan. And that should be pretty clear if you just read her actual election platform published on her official website. And I'm actually surprised that the far right is waking up at this specific moment, like after the November 4th meeting. I don't know why that's the watershed moment for them. I don't know what about that meeting just enlightened the whole far right community about who Takaichi really is. Takaichi has been consistent this whole time. Nothing that she said in the November 4th meeting is different from what she's always been saying. So, yeah, this is just like a sudden, awakening moment for the far right that, oh, Takaichi is not anti-immigration. And if you've watched my previous podcast videos, you should know that I've already said during the election season that, hey, I'm not seeing anything in Takaichi's written platform about anything that's like stopping immigration or banning foreigners. She's not committed herself to promising any policy that stops immigration or bans foreigners. Like I said that during my analysis of her election strategy, even back during the election season before she was elected prime minister, and that's how you know that Takaichi has been consistent, and she's never promised that she will stop immigration. And yeah, if you haven't seen my previous videos analyzing what she said during the election, you can check it out. So yeah, now looking back on my own analysis of Takaichi, even during the election season, it turns out that my analysis turned out to be pretty correct. So that's a pat on my own shoulder. Uh, so if you like my way of analyzing Japanese politics, if you like this content, please consider joining me on Patreon. Most of my Patreon content is free, and I look forward to connecting with you on Patreon. You can ask me questions. I give private advice to my followers on Patreon. So I hope to see you there, and I will see you next time.